Welcome back. In this lecture, we will be talking about using data validation tools. Excel's data validation feature is different than a lot of other data management features in that it's mostly about data before it goes into a worksheet, not after. And we're looking at a sheet called Data Validation in our workbook called 12 Data Management Features. Let's imagine we're about to create a list here. We've got an ID number, a compensation, a status, and a department. Let's say, for example, let's work with the ID number first. And let's say, for example, that the ID number must be 6 characters. They might all be numbers, they could be all letters, they could be a combination of either. Let's say it's a combination of letters and numbers. In our example here, let's select column A. And before using the data validation feature, to highlight the cells where you want the rule to be put in place. These are referenced as data validation rules. We go to the Data tab in the ribbon if we're not already there. We're not, so I'll click Data. And I'll go into what we call Data Validation, and I'll click on Data Validation. And from there, for the settings, basically what I want to do, these are the different options that we have, and I'm going to say text length. Text will allow alpha and numeric characters, and I'm going to say that it is equal to, and let's say we're going to say 7 characters. So I'm going to highlight that and type in 7. Then I'm going to have an input message that I'd like to remind the data entry operator. And I want to give her a message. I could say caution, warning, reminder. So I'll put a title in. I'll click in the title, location, and say reminder. And the message I want to say is must be exactly 7 characters long. We could be more specific and say something, like it must begin with a letter or must begin with a number, but maybe not. Here we're going to allow all alpha and numeric characters to be entered. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now, if you notice when I click on the cells, I get the reminder, must be exactly 7 characters long. So I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hit my enter key. Maybe I want to go 1, 2, 3. If I hit enter, then I'll get an error message that says this value does not match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. So I'm going to go with a retry. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, D. Okay, I can go A, B, C, D, 4, 4, 4, 4. And naturally I'll get that. I'll cancel out. That takes me out of here, and that gives me an opportunity to enter something more appropriate. So that's data validation using a length of 7 characters for the ID number. The next one we want to look at is the compensation. I'll go ahead and click on column B. And let's say, for example, that we want the salaries that might have an upper limit. They might also even have a range. But let's say that everybody in this organization, we want a list of those that are below $125,000. So I'm going to click on B. I'm going to go over and select data if it's not already selected from the ribbon, and into data validation. And from here, I'm going to set up my settings. I'm going to say allow a whole number. We could say whole number, decimal list, date, time, but I think whole number is more appropriate. And then for our data, it can be between, not between, equal to, not equal to, greater than, less than. So we want all of the salaries less than $125,000. So we will click that. And then for an input message, I don't want to put an input message here. We'll kind of skip that. We'll just give a basic error alert. So I'll click on error alert. And I'll click for my title to be caution. And I'll give 3 explanation points to really get their attention. And the message that I want to say must be under $125,000. And from that, I'm going to click OK. So now when I go to enter the compensation, 123,000 goes in. So if I try my 125, notice I'm going to get my error message. Caution, must be under $125,000. So I'm going to retry. I'm going to go 124,9999. And I made an error. I'll say retry. And we'll just backspace and get whether one of those 9s. And then I'll go 124.5. And so you get the idea with setting up data validation rules for a compensation that must be under $125,000. Our next example, we're going to click on the status here. And we want to allow the data entry person to pick the data from a pick list. So we're going to click on column C. And we're going to use the values over here in column G. And also the columns in H is a listing of departments. So for our status, we're going to click on C, go to our data validate data, and then data validation. We're going to click down, click on data validation, go to settings, and what we're going to look for is we're going to look for list. Notice that data is grayed out for us. In our source, we're going to click in here and we're going to go over to column G and shade the source of information that we want. And once we get that, we click OK. Okay. So basically what this does is when you click in the cell, you get a drop down, whereas you can select the various statuses. So let's say, for example, that we have a new status that we want to add. And let's add that status. It's intern. And I'll hit enter over here. And if I go over here, you'll notice that intern is not included. So we need to include intern in our list. So I'll go ahead and click on that. And I'll wait for my cursor to turn from a white cross to a black cross. And I'll shift, click, and drag this right up. And release. Now if we go over here and click, you'll notice that intern is part of our listing. Okay, so the next validation technique that we want to show you is using the department. In department, all of the departments are included over here in column H, quite a few of them. Some of the words we want to make sure that we have consistency with these words and that there's no misspelling. So basically what I want to do is include these as part of a listing for our department. So I'm going to click on D. I'm going to go to data on the ribbon and select data validation. For my settings, I'm going to pick from a list. No data. My source is going to be, I'm going to click there and I'm going to shade all of the departments. And I'm going to click OK. So when I go over here to enter the departments, I'm going to click. Notice that the departments are in alphabetical order. But one thing I'd like to notice is that maybe a lot of my employees are from manufacturing. It's kind of far down in the list. So basically what I want to do is I want to click on manufacturing and move that up more toward the top of the list so that the data entry operator doesn't have to go as far down the list to get the data entered. So I'm going to select it, move my cursor up to the edge of the cell, click the shift, hold down the shift, and drag it right on up to closer to the top of the list. So now when I click, as you see, manufacturing is there. They don't have to click and scroll. It's right there. So those are some of the tricks with using data validation. So, and it's up to you to be the judge as to how often you want to change the order of this. But I think this is a great feature, and it's just basically a demonstration on how you can use data validation and resequence your pick list. So, you've seen some variations on how to use a very powerful tool. Let's say, for example, that we have this data here in this spreadsheet, and we want to turn it over to our data operator, but we don't necessarily want he or she to be able to see this data. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to click it, shade it, and we're going to do a Control X to cut. And basically what we're going to do is add a new sheet. Normally you would do a plus sign. There's our new sheet. Click in cell A1, right click, and do a paste. And voila, our data is pasted. So now if we go back to our original sheet, we see that this information is gone from the sheet. And then in addition, if we need to hide this sheet because we don't want anyone to tamper with this data, we want those departments exactly like they are. We want those statuses to remain as they are. So what we could do, we could go ahead and right click on the sheet and click hide. And then if you notice, if we go back to our options, they are still there. The data entry operator can continue to enter the values. So that is a basic overview of data validation. We've seen some variations on how to use it, a very powerful tool for controlling data before it goes into a data sheet or a worksheet. Data validation found on the Data tab.